is Super Robinson Bros, the podcast companion to our game review webcomic. I'm Nick.
And I'm Nate.
And we're real-life brothers who play, well, pretty much a game once a month. Sometimes more, sometimes not less. Definitely once a month.
No. Great. Good start, Nick. Kicking it off with a bang. I can't even get past what it is we do.
Of all time.
Yeah. So if you didn't listen to the pre-show here, what Nick's talking about is we're going to talk about Hellblade today. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game that Nick and I have both played. We recorded this podcast in the past already before someone lost their half of the podcast, and we had to go and do it again. So it's been a little bit since we played it. We're going to do a lot of this from memory. Some of us have notes, some of us don't have notes, and some of us are going to be trying to make it up.
Whoa. You can't throw me under the bus for all of this. You lost your part, for the record. But, all right. Yeah, fact. We both played this game. I played it over on the Xbox. I think Nate probably played it on the PC. I don't know. Who cares?
When in doubt, I played it on PC. This one is a game from Ninja Theory. The guys who had done, the team that had done things like Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and DMC, and a couple others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now. But they're kind of
more recently that Bleeding Edge game. Man, they're all over the place. These guys.
Did that come out? I've not seen anything about that game. Are they working on it still?
It's on Twitch.
They're still working on it. Oh, okay. We don't play the hot new games. We play games that came out. And when did this one come out, Nick? I think 2017.
Oh, don't ask me that. You know, I think I knew that the first time we recorded this podcast.
Great.
It's been so long now.
So
it's been a couple years, and they've already announced the sequel to this game. So
that's a good point.
Apparently, some people liked it.
Let's definitely talk about that at the end here. So this is an interesting game for a couple of reasons. It's a over the shoulder third person action game. And that's, it's got a really beautiful look to it, but what makes it unique, because it has some kind of basic combat, some action, some puzzles. What makes it unique, Nick, is that you are playing as Senua. She's a woman of, I think, like Celtic origin who has had.
I mean, that's very unique right there. I've never played as someone named Senua before.
But it's like set in the age of. You're right. That's the only thing that makes this unique is the name of the character and no, it's that she's suffering from what seems to be some sort of psychosis or mental illness, and so you have a mission in the game to go complete, but you have to do it while you're kind of being haunted by horrors of your mind and plagued by things that you're not entirely sure are real. It's fascinating, and it takes a game that otherwise would be pretty, in my opinion, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, like would be pretty pedestrian in terms of like the actual moment gameplay in some cases, and puts it in an entirely new light where like you're definitely put in the mind of this character.
That is true. I would say though, maybe specifically like some of the gameplay mechanics you might think are a bit pedestrian, but I will say that this thing certainly is a beauty to look at, and it's very fluid, and like there are things about it that are certainly not super pedestrian and very memorable. But you are right, Nate, that like from the most unique aspect of this game, I think, is just the kind of underlying story and situation that you find yourself in, and then the ways that they unravel that on top of what I would say is pretty good core gameplay and mechanics.
Yeah,
nothing like amazing, like oh my gosh, the combat is incredible or something along those lines, but it's a super solid foundation to kind of sprinkle that crazy unique business on top of.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think it's fair to say that like there is combat in the game. You have like weapon. You're doing kind of standard heavy and normal attacks and dodges and whatnot. And I think the combat is totally serviceable. Like it's not bad. It's not amazing. It's not God of War. You're not doing combos of any like real significant notes. But it feels satisfying, and like the encounters that I recall from the game were there's actually pretty challenging in places, and you have to kind of get decent at managing crowds and using your abilities. So let's talk a little bit about the combat here, because it's the first place in my opinion where the kind of psychosis and the way that you experience the world through her eyes was impacted by. And in the case of combat, you are. I mean, it's hard to talk about one element in this game because it all just kind of bleeds over one another. This game has amazing sound design. I think that's one of the best things about this game. And you're constantly you're under assault by different voices. And it's, I don't know if she's technically schizophrenic, but there are definitely like tropes of schizophrenia being, exhibited here, right? Like you're hearing voices, and those voices will tell you things during combat about like, watch out, there's a guy behind you, he's coming close to you, or on top of things about, you're not going to make it, you're going to die, watch out. And
yeah, that's true.
So like you get better
you're undercutting yourself all the time.
Totally. And man, actually, that's kind of worth talking about on its own, but we'll save that for a second, I guess. Just the combat itself, I thought was really good, or really solid, I suppose. And then being able to just kind of keep aware of your surroundings and the crowds, and then also listening to the audio cues was actually made it more compelling than kind of something that was just pretty standard fare combat, hack and slash.
And they definitely also use that sound design to not only during combat to make it, I guess, a little bit more interesting, but I mean the kind of the underlying constant sounds that you're hearing as you're just walking through the world. You just feel everything just kind of feels unsettling, kind of at all times. But there's never a moment where you're just taking a nice deep breath and kind of relaxing. There's always some sense of what's lurking, just beyond the next corner, or even behind you, or anywhere at any time. Which is also how a lot of these battles materialize. They just kind of sometimes come out of thin air.
Yeah.
There are other places where it's a little bit more predictable, and it's like, okay, well, this is clearly like a big boss battle or something like that. Oh, they're closing the doors, and all right, let's do this.
Right.
But there are other times when you're not quite sure, and this is the kind of game where you play it in using headphones is definitely going to get you quite a bit more. So depending on how much you're looking for in terms of that, sometimes it's a bit of a scare, but I'd say just more that kind of creepy feeling.
I think that's a good way of putting it. It's definitely a game where you definitely don't feel like you have any shelter. And it's not even from the enemies; it's more from just what's going on in your head. You don't get any moment's peace. You're just being assaulted on all fronts, whether that's from like actual enemies or things that the audio, obviously, but then also the total presentation package of this game is incredible. And I think that's the thing that when we look at this game in total, the thing that definitely stuck with me is the visuals are incredible, the audio is amazing, and then those two things kind of like work together to present a good story, number one, but also lay out exactly or make it really clear. You do the best job of anything I've ever seen, probably in any medium, of making it clear like what psychosis is and like what mental illness actually might feel like. And they make you question whether the things you're seeing are real. There are puzzles around things like that, and certainly just the way that you encounter the enemies, like Nick's referencing there a second ago. The things that happen in this game, like the story itself, is fantastical at times. Where the point where you're like, is this happening, or is this a thing that I'm just imagining as Senua?
A lot of like kind of reality bending things that happen, which again like adds to that sort of unsettling feeling, and or like you said, just kind of questioning your reality at all times,
which is cool.
Which is it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's really different. And honestly keeps you going. Like even though there might be pieces that feel a bit repetitive, you do want to keep knowing certainly where the story resolves, but like what are they going to kind of layer on top of that next? What are they going to throw at you? And they do a good job of, I think, kind of keeping that pretty fresh.
It's also a very stylish game. So it's got this everything's bad, right? It's dark, it's dreary, but they make it look incredible, and you've got really interesting visuals with like regard to color choice or lighting to kind of communicate your way through the environment, or to communicate her mental state at any point in time, or where she wants to go. It's really like a master's course on just kind of subtle visual design, I think. But also trying to basically telling a story visually, and making her mind almost like a character in the game. What did you think about the story as a whole, Nick? Do you recall enough from when we recorded this the first time to speak intelligently about this?
I don't know that I could ever speak intelligently. So if that's a prerequisite on this whole podcast thing, I might have to
zing.
I think there was definitely a point in time where I sort of tired of it, because there is a broader mission or a quest, I guess, that you're embarking on, and they do throw a lot at you throughout that, but you're still kind of one note. So there was, at some point I was sort of just like, all right, whatever. Like I don't really care how this thing ultimately wraps up, but I'm enjoying the ride, enough. That's kind of also why I was a little bit surprised. I know you said we'll save this for the end, but a little bit surprised about a sequel because it also felt like it was pretty nicely encapsulated. It was a relatively simple quest that she was going on, and it felt like there was, once you finally reached the end, it was like, okay, there's some nice conclusion there in my mind. But you're giving me a really funny look. So
well, I don't think that there was like a great. They didn't wrap it up in a nice little bow. I mean, they definitely resolved some aspect of what she was trying to do, but there was still so many questions I had, and I think that was part of the intention. Sure. Like you don't know what you just went through because you don't know if you could trust a lot of what you experienced given like her mental state. But I don't think it was a great story, but it was a compelling character that I wanted to see through.
Yeah, I guess it was like interesting motivation, interesting character,
right?
And then you're just kind of along for the ride. I mean, I guess I don't want to spoil anything, but like the thing that she went to go do is sort of concluded. But then like there's like questions all around everything, as she traversed and as she eventually sort of got to that place or that state.
Yep.
That left it pretty like, wait, what just happened?
Can I take a quick detour real fast and just talk about not only that story, but like how many similarities there were between this and another game we played fairly recently?
Yeah, sure.
I could not help but be struck at the number of similarities between this game and this is going to sound weird maybe, but like God of War, the most recent God of War, both are. I have like a little list here that I want to work down of all the things that are similar.
Okay.
And it's kind of amazing to me. One, both are third-person action games. Two, both are set in. We haven't talked about this really yet. Like they're set within Norse mythology. Like you're definitely living.
Right.
She's Celtic or Celtic, and she's going.
Yeah,
her,
I don't know.
Vikings have definitely Vikings have done her wrong, and she's going back and trying to set things right. And she's dealing with Norse mythology as part of that. So you got that similarity. Yeah. The setting looks a lot the same as a result. Obviously, you're talking about like Scandinavian settings. Gods are your antagonists in the game in many cases.
Right.
That's
certainly true.
You have these lore stones scattered throughout the world that you kind of encounter that don't really add anything to the game's story, but just kind of flesh out the world. That honestly kind of act as the game's collectibles. They're totally optional.
Right.
But they're
told, it's kind of like pre-recorded things almost.
But they're little lore vignettes told by a disembodied male voice, which is just like in God of War. You're not sure about the sanity of your main character. Your goal is dealing with the remains of a lost lover. And I think the kicker of it all is that you have a severed head on your hip for the entire game. And like, what is going on? How do these two games come out in such close proximity to each other and have all these similarities? It's insane to me. I think they came out.
Do you have an answer there, or is that totally rhetorical?
It's rhetorical. I don't have an answer.
I mean, it is kind of unbelievable how many similarities there are. So who are you accusing of which? Which one came out first?
I actually went back and looked at this to see if I was like the first person. I'm sure I wasn't, but like I definitely was not. And evidently, so God of War came out second. And there was definitely some wink and nod, like oh my god, I can't believe we both kind of ended up in the same area. And I think some of it is fair because they're sharing those, two games in the same mythology isn't unheard of. I think it's just it's an underserved mythology. Yeah, it's just so like you don't get too many of these when you don't get too many games set in Norse mythology. Although now there's a new Assassin's Creed that's coming out. Maybe we'll have another one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's underserved, so they're just doubling down. But I mean, they kind of. I guess I don't know enough about the Norse mythology, but maybe even like the idea of bringing someone's head along with you is a common trope or something like that. I don't know.
Is that a Norse thing?
But it is kind of unbelievable how similar it is.
Yeah.
That said, they're pretty different games at the end of the day, but yeah,
they are
a lot of very kind of on its surface very similar things.
I think they a couple more things I want to hit on here. First off, the game is not the most complicated game in terms of gameplay. It's all about the story and the presentation and the characterizations. We talked a little bit about the combat. There's that's kind of half of what the game, maybe a third of what the game is. One third is
Yeah.
just walking around, like just moving from one scene to the next, listening to her talk.
And they're beautiful scenes.
They
these
really
environments
are.
and stuff. And often when you're going from one to the other, like they show you some amazing stuff.
It feels often like half walking simulator, though. Like just the amount of
because it can be pretty
just,
sparse. I mean, you're on your own.
And the other half of it, or the other third of it rather, is these puzzles. And puzzles they kind of vary. There's a lot of repetitive puzzles, and certainly that's true for the combat after a while. I think they're the first few times you encounter them, they're pretty interesting because it's all about like what she perceives in the world and how she kind of sees things that may or may not be there.
Right.
And again, gameplay mechanics, the presentation, all feed back into that overall theme. Did you like the gameplay? Did you enjoy playing this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the biggest repetitive piece that I grew tired of was probably the combat, more so than the puzzles and you just kind of like walking around. And sometimes I don't recall if you really are like retracing steps much or if you're pretty well on a path.
Usually you're moving forward,
but I feel like the environments were interesting. Like I said, a lot of it was just really, really beautiful to look at. And I found the puzzles pretty easy overall. But you know me, like I'm not playing games for like some sort of crazy challenge. So I thought they were all pretty fun, and you're often interacting with the world. So I thought it was just kind of icing on that. So I enjoyed it. It kept me very engaged and interested, more so honestly than probably the overall story, and certainly the combat. What
Fair
about
enough.
you? Like some of that combat I remember being kind of hard.
The combat actually, there were a couple times where you had some difficulty and they're ganging up on you. I enjoyed the game as a whole. I thought it was fairly light in a good way. Like it was focused on the story. Like games like this are notorious for like being 30 hours long sometimes, and you're just like, okay, I got it. Like, you're drawing this thing out, and this game was like, I don't know, 6
short.
hours or so, and it was focused on the game, on the story, and you just kind of like it's a little breezy, but I was engaged enough with the puzzles and thought they were unique that they didn't overstay their welcome. Right, the game didn't overstay its welcome. You got in, got out, and had a full total experience, which I know you always love because you don't like long games.
No
but
kidding.
Okay, we haven't talked about this yet. One thing that does amp up the intensity of
I was gonna ask
the gameplay and the combat and kind of put some stakes on there in a game that is pretty short is this promise and threat of permadeath. Early on in the game, I think you can even see it in our gameplay video. There's a mention that like if you die enough times, we're gonna erase your save file, which
right. I mean, they basically set it up so they put you in an impossible situation that really sets up the very beginning of your journey. You die, or at least I died. I don't know, Nate. You probably no.
I don't think it was. Yeah.
That's right. So they basically warn you that if you die enough times, you're gone. Like you're just over. Reset your progress.
Right.
You gotta start over. At least that's the implication. That kind of tripped me out. It tripped me up pretty good for a while there. What about
it makes you stress out, right? Like you're in these big combat encounters, you're fighting a boss, and you're just like, oh my god, I don't know, I got to do whatever I can to stay alive here because if I die, I'm going to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what, Nick? It was all a lie. I went back after the game was over, and I was like, what? Okay, how many times did you have to die before this happens? Because there's a little bit of like an in-game indicator as to like how many times you could die before you start having some problems, and I never quite hit it, and I was like, man, was I close? I'm not so sure. It ends up it was just a thing that
they're kind of showing you as it continues, and at some point I was at least like, I don't think this is progressing much because I'm certainly dying a bit here. Yeah. What's this going to be like? But yeah,
it's kind of.
What do you feel about that overall?
Well, so they did it because they wanted to convey her sense of stress and her psychosis, I guess. And I tell you what, it was effective. It certainly conveyed that. I appreciate that they kind of found a way to make me empathize with the character, but I also feel kind of cheated. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's a good thing for like the games are art, argument. But I did feel like it was a little bit of a dirty trick in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for a game that's already so amped up on tension, it just compounded that.
For sure.
So I guess I got to give it to them as the creators. Like that is. They created a mood. They created a situation that will, no matter what you do, stress you the F out. But yeah, I think I would have liked to have maybe known that from the get-go, just as a player, so that I didn't feel quite as stressed maybe. But I guess that was part of their point, right? So I think that is cool.
Totally.
I guess the thing though now is that the cat's out of the bag, so it kind of ruins it for Hellblade 2. But maybe they'll try another trick on us.
I'm sure they will. Like, it makes me think of like Eternal Darkness, right? Like finding ways to screw with the player, whether or not they're real or not. That was a game that was notorious for like faking, like moving your volume down on your TV or switching inputs or whatever.
So funny.
It was mind bending at the time, and I think this game does great to kind of call back to that sense of like just forcing you to feel a certain way, even if it's not exactly authentic. I think it's a good thing to do. I just think you have to be really careful that you don't over commit a player to your fate.
Right.
Okay, a couple last things here. There's FMV in the game, quite a bit of it, as well as some performance capture, like a lot of performance capture. There's I think there's an actress that's named in the game. A lot of them actually for different characters. Right. I think in general, it was terrific. I think Senua, the actress who plays Senua, was amazing. They
did a really good job of like stylistically merging it in.
They did.
And sometimes too, I'm like, wait, is that video or is that because just the way it was treated? So I thought it was pretty compelling. And then you got these real, acted performances, which added a lot of depth.
I agree. I sometimes FMV can kind of feel cheesy, and it didn't quite do that in this game. And then I think maybe the last thing here is we talked a lot about the mental message or mental illness, empathy that they're trying to convey here, at least illustrate how that's affected. And it's just, I talked about this. I feel like it was one of the most successful at that at any medium I've experienced. The very first credit in this game is a mental health advisor. I've never seen anything like that. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, no kidding.
I hope we see more games that do something similar when they have a certain topic that they want to explore. They're that engaged. I did some research anyways, especially when writing these comics, to make sure I wasn't stepping on toes with terminology, and like it was refreshing to know that the game was taking it that seriously as well, that they weren't just like
agreed.
Just working with what do you call them, tropes or stereotypes about different types of mental illness. So totally, I can't speak.
It's nice to see people take it seriously and to bite off something as challenging as this, and frankly do such a great job, I think, of pulling it off. I don't suffer from this particular mental illness, so it's hard to comment exactly maybe on how it feels, but it definitely feels like they've got their message across in a respectful way, and in such a beautifully stylized game as well. That honestly was an experience.
Absolutely,
an experience to play, and one that overall I certainly have recommended and would recommend to quite a few people, which is my really lame attempt at a segue of, Nate, would you recommend this to people in the form of a 1 to 5 kind of rating scale?
I think I definitely would. This is
surprise!
Surprise! We've only talked about really the best things.
We're on said scale.
I honestly, Nick, I think I have very few complaints about this game. It is a bit thin in the gameplay side of things, but again, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it definitely pulled me through. I wanted to see it through completion. The visuals, the presentation were such that, like, even if I wasn't super into a story at any particular time, I was just wanting to see what they were going to throw at me next. There's some really scary stuff in this game. Some stuff that really puts you on edge. Maybe it makes you uncomfortable or like really actually makes you scary. And it is unsettling. And that's like I respect games that can do that.
Totally.
So to me, honestly, I can't think of anything this game does poorly. I really am excited to see what they do with the sequel, what they think they can add.
Yeah, no kidding.
That the first game didn't do, and keep it. Is it still going to be about Senua? Is it going to be? I hope not. Honestly, I kind of hope it's about something else.
Something about Senua. The subtitle I think is Senua's Sacrifice or something like that. So I'm really curious. But I this isn't about the sequel. I think the game itself, I think, is such a great encapsulation. Honestly, it starts out with such a bang that immediately it hits you with this tone. It hits you with these voices. You start out all alone, and you basically do finish the game that way. It's like I just feel like it's firing on all cylinders at all times. The pieces that I kind of ran into this. I won't go at length in it because I did it in our first podcast, but no one will ever hear it. Nate. But I ran into a pretty annoying bug that was really, really bad in it. And honestly, I wasted quite a bit of time trying to piece things together because it's almost like, is this supposed to be happening? You know, I'm questioning all these other things, and this is a really, really dark thing. So I basically got stuck in pitch blackness for almost an hour.
An hour.
It clearly,
oh my God.
Clearly was a bug. I don't know, man. I lost a sense of all time.
Good Lord.
But you know, it was clearly a bug, and hopefully, and it was really the only one that I encountered. It was a pretty bad one, but I don't know that I would really dock this game as a whole.
Yeah.
As a result, and then my only other qualms really are some of the repetitive stuff that we've talked about. But because this game is so short, like you said, it doesn't really overstay its welcome at any point. You're always moving, unless you're stuck in a pitch black cave for an hour. But other than that, you're always moving, and I just think it's not a crazy big time commitment. And now that the game has been out for a couple of years, honestly, it's not that big of a financial commitment either. So I would recommend this game to anybody who kind of appreciates what games can do. Like you said, kind of games as art, right? Like the power that a game can have, the staying power, and it sits with you. I mean, once you start playing this thing, at least my experience was, I just had to keep playing it. Like I just wanted to go back, keep going back to that well, and then be done with it and be completely done with it for good.
Well, I think it's I think I give it a 5. I really can't think of, other than maybe, I guess the one last thing I can say that is negative about it is that there's no tutorial in the game, and it expects you to kind of experiment with its mechanics to figure things out.
Yeah.
To the point of I didn't even know there was a heavy attack in the game until
well, you're an idiot.
until the game was over. Yeah, I mean, there's only like 4 buttons that are being used. Yeah, I straight up did not know.
Because this isn't like you've got to learn all these buttons. Like there's like 4 buttons maybe in the whole game. You know, it's very, very simple.
Yep.
You're just walking around. I mean, obviously you have to figure out how to use 2 different sticks.
That's on me, man.
But there's just a couple different buttons.
That's on me.
Oh man, that's amazing.
I still give it a 5.
Oh God.
I think that's. It sounds like you're gonna give it a 5 as well.
Yeah, I would give it a 5. I think my qualms are really small ones, and like I said, I just think it's such a memorable, unique thing. Except for all the things that are identical between it and God of War. But I think it's such a unique game. It is totally worth playing. If you're a lover of video games, this game is something you got to play. So with that, I would say certainly a 5.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, if you haven't already, check out our webcomic review of Hellblade on superrobinsonbros.com when it runs here. And don't forget to listen and subscribe to us, and our gameplay video on YouTube. Listen to subscribe to us here on our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. I promise you we are there. Nick, anything else?
Yes, we got a thriving Discord community. I'm not sure what the definition of thriving is, but hop over on Discord, chat with us. And one of our favorite things that we do is that we every month we play along with a lot of our patrons and Discord folks. So hop in there. The price is free. Having a good time. And of course, if you like what we're doing, if you want to support us, jump on over to Patreon and become a patron for as little as $1 a month. And we'd be super appreciative, and we love all of our existing patrons. So thank you all.
Yeah, we actually just kickstarted our patron pick process again here, and all patrons get to pick what we play or help vote on what we play. So that's one of our favorite benefits, I think. Anyways, thanks again for listening. We'll see you fine people next time. Until then, bye-bye.
See ya.